Today, my guests are mother and son authors, Anne and Chris Rice, and I will be talking to them about their latest novels and their appearance together this evening at UC Riverside Palm Desert campus at 6 p.m. It is free, but reservations are required. So you can call UCR and make your reservations. I'm going to be starting with best-selling author Anne Rice, but first I want to tell you a little something about her. Of course, she's so well known, but she has written 20 books featuring the mysterious world of vampires, and she has moved, however, from that subject to her latest from Alfred A. Knopf of Random House called Angel Time, a story, as the title implies, about a guardian angel. Now, Anne is a resident of Rancho Mirage, California, and I'm speaking to her by telephone at her home in Rancho Mirage. Anne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anne, let's get started by your telling my audience a little bit about what your book is about, just a brief overview.
Well, Angel Time is the first in a series of books that I want to write about a new hero, Toby O'Dare. And in the book, Toby's a hitman for the government, but he is a sort of burnt-out soul, and he gets an opportunity to repent. He's visited by an angel, really an answer to a prayer that he utters. And the angel says, why don't you repent, turn away from killing people, and come to work for me answering prayers? And Toby does. And really what the series will do will give me an opportunity to write about Toby's adventures as he works for the angels. They send him back in time. The idea is the angels can see all of time happening simultaneously, and they can move Toby from the 21st century to the 13th century or any other time, really, to help answer prayers. And to me, it's very exciting to be doing this new series of books.
Well, it sounds exciting to me too. I'm glad to hear that. That was going to be one of my questions, but now you've answered that. But I'd like to know that after doing at least 20 books about vampires, 20 or so books about vampires, what inspired you to turn from vampires to this heavenly creature?
Well, a lot of it had to do with my own personal spiritual growth or conversion. The vampire for me was a metaphor for a lost soul living in darkness, a kind of atheistic soul. And that's what I was for many, many years. And so it made perfect sense to write vampire novels. For me, they were very heavily metaphorical. But after I went back to my church and experienced faith returning to me, the books really didn't make a lot of sense for me anymore. Also, I'd done 12 of them. So I'd kind of done it, and I really wanted to move on and write something about somebody who's got a different perspective. I still love supernatural fiction. I love the idea of angels now rather than vampires. I love the idea of Toby O'Dare having hope instead of despair.
Well, it's a great theme, and I've started the book. I haven't finished it, and I never finished the book until after I've done my interview with the author, and it is quite a story. What do you think is the fascination, first of all, with vampires? Do you think you started it with Interview with the Vampires?
Well, not really. I mean, it was already there, I mean, Dracula was a household word in America, when I wrote Interview with the Vampire. I certainly, I guess, brought something to it,
Absolutely.
Writing from the point of view of the vampire, making the vampire a tragic figure, trying to get into his heart and soul. And I loved creating characters like Louis and Lestat and Armand and Claudia, the various people in my books. But vampires have always been popular. I mean, ever since they were invented kind of in modern literature in the 18th century and the 19th century, they've been very, very popular. And it's no surprise that people are going to continue to write fascinating vampire stories.
Well, yes, you're right. There always has been that fascination, but I think I think that certainly since the movie version, with two good-looking guys, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, that didn't hurt any, and now the teenagers have their own teen vampire. So I think there's a certain romance that goes along with it now. Do you agree with that?
Oh, completely. I mean, especially the Twilight series. It's very romantic, and it's romantic in a traditional way. It echoes back to Jane Eyre, to the idea of a young, vulnerable woman falling in love with a older, mysterious figure who is protective and yet menacing. And I think Miss Meyer deserves a lot of credit for kind of doing Jane Eyre in high school for kids today.
Yes.
I mean, that's really kind of what it's about. It's the age-old formula. It's the same formula you see in Rebecca, in this novel. And she did it in a new way, and I think it's, I mean, I understand. I think she's getting criticism, but that's because she's so popular.
Well, I suppose that's true. Yes, anybody that makes it big in a seemingly short time,
Right.
As she's done with Twilight, and certainly there has been criticism about popular authors in the past too. The other thing is the fact that it really is directed toward teens,
Right.
and I think that worries some people. But
well, teenagers have always read these books. I mean, I have readers as young as 9 and 10 and 11 writing me emails about my books.
Well, that amazes me. 9, 10, and 11.
Oh, yeah. A lot of 11 and 12-year-olds especially read my books, and they particularly like one called Memnoch the Devil, and it's really a book all about creation, and, Lestat, my hero, goes to heaven and to hell in the book, and they like that. They like the philosophy. They like the questions, and I'm amazed at some of the emails I get. These kids are really precocious, and it's wonderful feedback for an author like me.
Well, I would say. Now, this is your 24th novel, I believe.
Oh, gosh, I think it's more like my 32nd.
Is it really?
I've lost track.
Oh,
I have
well,
to count these books.
I was counting, I know, but then I guess there were some that weren't in the list that I missed. But
right.
Okay, it's anywhere close to 30 maybe.
Something.
And in this book there is still a character that does start out as a bad guy, as you talked about. And what I found intriguing was the fact that this killer actually was fascinated with California missions, and the opening scenes take place at the Mission Inn in Riverside, and I'm quite curious, and I know my listeners will be as well. Why did you choose that as your setting?
I fell in love with that place. I'd been told about it by people here. You have to go to the Mission Inn, you have to see it. So finally I went just for the weekend. And I thought, this is incredible. I have to set my hero Toby here. The whole novel just came to life for me at the Mission Inn. I later ended up describing the room in which I stayed, the restaurant, the whole layout of the hotel, and then, of course, also describing San Juan Capistrano, the mission, the basilica there. All of this proved very fertile and very inspiring for me. I love these places. I think they're beautiful.
Yes.
And wonderfully romantic.
And did you visit all of the missions?
Not all of the missions, no. I visited the Carmel mission, San Juan Bautista, and also San Juan Capistrano, but I have many more I'd like to visit.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, they're certainly spread out, so it does require a lot of traveling. But yes, and when one goes into these missions, there is that air of, well, how to describe it? It's quite mysterious as well as spiritual.
Oh, I just love it. I mean, at San Juan Bautista, I used to love to go into the old refectory and stand there and think about the monks when they ate at the table there. And there was a collection of old carriages there in the museum that was beautiful. I love, I come from New Orleans, and I'm used to historic buildings and romance and atmosphere. And I find echoes of New Orleans in the Mission Inn and in the missions.
That's interesting that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your current book that we're talking about, Angel Time, and that was going to be my next question. And we know, as you said, you're going to continue with the subject and the character in your future work. Is this particular story, Angel Time, would you say it's a story about redemption?
Oh, definitely. It's about turning your life around. And Toby does that, and it's about hope. And it's also my desire to write an exciting supernatural novel that is not about darkness and despair, but about hope, about, trying to show that that this can be as exciting to readers maybe as a vampire novel is exciting. That Toby going to work for the Angels and plunging into history can be very, very thrilling. And I love to write, chapters set in the 12th century, 13th century, whatever. I do a lot of research. I love to read on the Middle Ages, and I love to talk about the people of those times and social situations. So it's a sort of multi-level thing for me. And my readers generally like this. They write all the time and say, we love the history in your novels, we love the descriptions of architecture and art. So this gives me a great opportunity to have Toby in motion, but Toby has hope. That's the main thing. He has hope of doing some good, hope of having a meaningful life.
Yes, it sounds like you've got a winning series here.
I hope so.
Yeah. What was the reaction to your work when you first switched from the vampire to the more spiritual material?
I got quite a range of reaction. Some of my old readers were very upset. They didn't like it. They were angry.
They felt betrayed.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
They said, "How can you abandon us?" And I said, "Well, look, there are 12 books. I've really got to move on." Then there were a lot of new readers and old readers too who embraced the books I wrote about Jesus, Christ the Lord out of Egypt, and Christ the Lord, the Road to Cana, and those books did very well, and they are still doing well. I find that my Christian books have a very long shelf life. They keep going as new people find them. And, of course, the vampire novels never really stop selling. They're always out there. But different books have different schedules, kind of
right.
Well, how long it takes to find the real audience. And, again, there have been all kinds of responses. Now, at this point, what gives me hope is the fact that many readers are emailing and posting on Facebook to say they read all of the stuff. That we like your old books, we like your new books.
Well, that's good.
And that's an author's dream.
Yes, absolutely. So you're finding new readers that then cover everything. That's terrific.
It's wonderfully inspiring, but I'll always disappoint some people. I mean,
sure.
I do too many different types of things, and I always get some controversy, and there's no consensus apparently. Some readers like the witch novels I did, others like the vampire, some only like the mummy novel I did about ancient Egypt. I mean, some
well, you
read...
like anything in life, Anne. I suppose you can't satisfy everyone. But
no.
I do want to ask you about this evening, and will this be the first time that you and Chris will have teamed together for an appearance?
Actually, no. Chris and I have appeared before. We were at the Palm Springs Writers' Conference a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
And we were interviewed on stage for that, or maybe Chris interviewed me on stage for that. But we love to appear together, and I'm looking forward to this discussion tonight.
Well, I'm looking forward to it also. I will be there, and I look forward to meeting you, and we are running out of time. It goes by so quickly, but certainly I'm looking forward to talking to Chris as well. And I want to thank you so much for being with us, Anne, and I will see you this evening.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
You're very
care.
welcome, and I've been talking to Anne Rice about her new book, Angel Time, and we have to take a break now. This is the Jacqueline Bachar Show. Chris Rice, who I'll be talking to from at his home in Hollywood, California. Now, Chris is the author of 4 New York Times best-selling novels. His first novel, Density of Souls, was published when he was only 22 years old. Can you believe that? He continues to receive awards and accolades for his thrillers. And his new novel, The Moonlit Earth, will be released by Scribner of Simon & Schuster on April 6th. Now, he and his mother, Anne Rice, will be appearing together tonight at UC Riverside Palm Desert to talk about their new books. It's free, but reservations are required. Well, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's very good to be here.
Well, that's terrific. I know my audience is going to be excited to hear both of you. Chris, let's start out by your giving my audience a brief overview of the story behind The Moonlit Earth.
Well, the basic log line, as they say, is that a young American woman discovers that her flight attendant brother is on a security camera footage from a hotel in Hong Kong, leaving the lobby about 30 seconds before a bomb goes off and kills 60 people. And he's leaving in the company of a Middle Eastern man who she doesn't recognize at all. And so suddenly, because he is not among the dead and because he's not been in touch with her family at all, her brother is implicated in this horrific terrorist event, and she says, this is ridiculous. I know my brother. He can't be involved in this. And so she basically sets out against the world and against members of her own family to prove his innocence, and it's a journey that takes her literally to the other side of the world, to Hong Kong and eventually to Thailand.
Well, it's just a terrific theme, and Moonlit Earth has your first female protagonist since The Snow Garden. Now, I want to ask the question, is your process different in writing about a female versus a male protagonist?
Gosh, it's so hard to say because my last male protagonist was a Force Recon Marine.
Uh-huh.
So with him, the responsibilities there were to a mountain of research that didn't necessarily have to do with gender, but it had to do with background, the history of the Marine Corps, their training. So it feels like it's been a long time since I wrote a normal guy.
Whatever that is, right?
Yeah, well, whatever that's going to be. But Megan is... I call her an every woman.
Uh-huh.
She's sort of got a heart of gold. She's done nonprofit work for most of her life since graduating college. She wants to sort of help people and reach out. But she's somebody who's sort of conflicted in her own life because she's come from a background of a lot of money, or I should say she was raised in an environment where everyone around her was very wealthy. So she doesn't necessarily have one set of political beliefs or another.
Right.
She's been exposed to a lot of different ways of going about the world. But what she does have is an unbelievable connection to her brother because their father did walk out on them when they were very young, and the two of them became very close as a result.
Now, the brother and sister lived in a community called Cathedral Canyon. Is that based on an area that you are familiar with, or is that strictly out of your head?
Well, it's actually Cathedral Beach. And it's a coastal community which I will say was inspired in large part by a certain beachfront town in the San Diego area, and we'll leave it at that.
Oh gosh, now you're going to keep me guessing all night. I'm going to be Googling.
Get you pretty close. I said San Diego is kind of. It doesn't take. It's basically La Jolla.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Right, and
yeah.
my rule of thumb. Well, first of all, I like the idea of coming up with my own sort of California community. Not because I'm not comparing myself to them, but it's a tradition among famous crime writers like Ross McDonald and Raymond Chandler to have their own fictional version of a California town. Chandler had Bay City. Ross McDonald had Santa Teresa, which was supposed to be Santa Barbara. So I now have Cathedral Beach, this is the second time I've used it. It was at the end of Blind Fall, my last book, but it's featured much more prominently in this book.
Yeah, well, I like that idea, and that's kind of fun too. I don't know where I got Cathedral Canyon from, but I certainly know it was Cathedral Beach, so I correct myself on that. What's interesting also is the fact that the crime in the story, as you say, it takes place in Hong Kong, Thailand, and it's quite important to the story as well. What kind of research did you do to create the plot in these areas? Had you visited Hong Kong and Thailand, or?
Well, it was interesting because I began to lay out the plot in my head before visiting either place, and my initial plan was to set most of the book in Thailand. I knew one of the characters was going to be a young Saudi male who was traveling the world on his yacht and sort of acting out in places far from home. And I thought, well, Thailand, based on what I know about it, is a very permissive, licentious culture. It would make sense that this guy was hanging out there. But when I got to Thailand, I thought, gosh, I'm really not connecting with this place on a level. I'm not that interested in setting the entire book here. And I had planned a few days in Hong Kong just because I had always wanted to visit Hong Kong. It was sort of like just the fun part of my research trip.
Right.
And the minute I got to Hong Kong, I realized this is where I want to set this book. Because by that time, I had also developed the plot in a certain direction where I realized it was becoming more and more a story about this family's wealth and the corrosive effects of that wealth on the individual family members. And I thought, well, Hong Kong, in a lot of senses, makes sense for a story like that because it's the capital of the global financial industry, practically.
And everyone seems to be fascinated with Hong Kong. There have been several writers that have placed stories in Hong Kong. I guess that's the place to visit these days, too. I've got to get there. You also answered another question. It sounds like then that you start with character and then develop it into plot.
I would say that's correct, and I would get more specific. I start with a relationship and then develop it into a plot. And with this book, it was the relationship between a brother and sister. And that's where I began.
Right. Now, Chris, and I'm talking to Chris Rice for those listeners just tuning in. Chris, you've written, as I said, 4 New York Times bestsellers, and as a writer, does that create pressure on you to do it again, or does it have a positive effect on your writing?
Oh, I think it has a positive effect. Every time you hear someone say something like that, it gives you kind of a warm fuzzy, for lack of a better term. This is such a tough business, particularly right now.
Yes.
You know, our industry is in such turmoil. We don't really know what the fate of the ebook is going to be. iPad is launching right now.
Yes, it is.
And we don't know what effect that's going to have. So, you know, a lot of authors whose numbers aren't quite where they needed to be were dropped by their publishers recently. Right. So I feel very, very blessed.
Well, yes.
That I'm on.
And you are the son of 2 very creative parents, Anne Rice, of course, and your late father, poet Stan Rice. To what degree have you been inspired by your amazing parents to be a writer?
Oh, gosh, to every degree. Although I have to say, I think they were convinced I was going to become an actor, and maybe a little bit disappointed when they realized I wasn't going to be. But I can't imagine more supportive parents in this area.
Yeah, that's terrific. And there was a great picture of you and your mother in the paper and talking about your appearance tonight at UC Riverside. And so I think everybody's in the area is all excited about it. Now, you've chosen to write thrillers. Did you experiment with other genres, or were you always attracted to the thriller theme?
Well, I have to say, when I wrote my first novel, I didn't see it as fitting in a specific genre. I almost thought it was multi-genre. I wasn't preoccupied with those terms yet. I saw those terms as being very limiting, whereas now I don't really feel that way. I see them as kind of liberating. They free you up to do certain things more passionately in your work. You know, and I think what always attracted me was suspense. You know, creating suspense in a context where there's mystery and where there's atmosphere. Those were always the books that I read and enjoyed. And my mom's probably most valuable piece of advice that she's ever given me was write the book that you want to read. So that's what I did.
Well, I am into the book. As I mentioned to your mother, I don't finish the book until after I have interviewed the author. It was a little tougher this time because I had 2 books to read for the same interview. So, and I'm a fast reader, but I can't read that fast. But I've gotten into both books enough to know that they're really terrific. And I love the way you are presenting the story. Now, I always hate to ask this question, but because here we're talking about your book that's going to be coming out on the 6th, but are you working on another book already, or are you taking a little break? What's next for you?
I've primarily been working on laying out my book tour, which starts this week, and I'll be going to about 10 different cities, and so that's sort of a full-time job, or it has.
Oh, it is, right.
The publicist at Scribner and I have been working diligently, particularly in this economy and this climate. We have to get creative and think outside the box. But to answer your question more specifically, yes, I have written about 80 pages of the next book, and I'm incredibly excited about it. And it is set in New Orleans, which is where I'm from. And I had said over and over again to anyone who would ask me, I will never do another book set in New Orleans. And here I am.
And here you are.
New Orleans, so
well, there's nothing wrong with New Orleans, and it's quite an interesting city and quite a sad city, and happy at the same time since the horrible flooding there. But I sure look forward to that. Now tonight you're going to be meeting with your mom, having a conversation. What can we expect from that?
A huge fight. No, I'm just kidding. We get along quite well. We love doing this. The last time we did this was in Palm Springs because Mom doesn't really care to travel anymore.
Uh-huh.
We did this at the Palm Springs Book Festival, and we had a good time. That time we actually didn't have a moderator, and tonight we will have a moderator, a writer named Todd Goldberg.
Oh, yes, I know Todd.
He's very funny. I love Todd and his brother Lee. So I think the moderator will change things a bit, but I think, I think we're very relaxed with each other, and I think it'll be like sort of, I don't know, having dinner with us, or a similar conversation to what we have around the dinner table when I visit her.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, and certainly I am planning on being there, even if I have to stand, if it's standing room only. And
you're soaping. I mean, I hope we get you a seat, but we would be thrilled if it was standing room only.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's going to be a good turnout because I'll tell you, UCR has been great in promoting this event. And it's really, pardon me, you have to excuse me, my allergy is acting up this morning. We've got some winds in the valley, and that is affecting my voice, so I do apologize for that. But anyway, they've been doing some great promotion on this. It's an exciting event, and I think it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to finishing your books, but especially to seeing you tonight. I hope I have a chance to chat with you a little bit. Where do you go from here?
Well, I'll be doing an event Tuesday night in West Hollywood at Book Soup, and then I'm off to New Orleans, which is fun.
Right.
My three hometowns.
Yes, right.
West Hollywood, New Orleans. And then I visit Little Rock, Atlanta, New York, San Francisco, and Ashland, Oregon.
Well, they all sound like fun places.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait. Ashland I've never been to before, so that'll be a first for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I know the book tours certainly can be exhausting, but it's a marvelous way to connect with your audience. And I know it's all about selling books, but the more people you meet, the more that are going to want to read your books. And so that's very important. And I would think, too, that being the son of Anne Rice can't hurt, and can't hurt your mom when they hear about you, too, that Anne is your mother. So I would think it would help both books because it's interesting for people to see how you differ one from the other.
Absolutely.
So, well, Chris, we are out of time, darn it, and I really appreciate your being with us, and I do look forward to seeing you this evening. And the next time your next book comes out, I'm sure going to have you on the show again. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Chris, bye now.
Take care.
Thank you. Well, we have to take a break now. This is the Jacqueline Bachar Show.